Hi, I'm Ashley McElwain, licensed marriage and family therapist and founder and CEO of Foundation Restoration. Welcome to Foundation Restoration's Real Talk podcast, where you'll find real people discussing real issues while offering real help at the intersection of clinical expertise and a biblical perspective. We're so glad you've joined us. Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 20 of the Real Talk podcast. I know that's not the world's largest milestone, but man, I am just blown away that we are 20 episodes in to this podcast. It's been so fun, and I'm super grateful for those of you who have been tuning in, and certainly thankful for all of the feedback and the kindness and the encouragement. It's such a delight to get to connect with you guys and to hear from you, and I am just super honored and grateful. So 20 episodes in, and I'm having a good time, so I hope you guys are too. It is wonderful to be joining you again, and I'm excited. I feel like there's just been a lot going on recently. I am a little bit on the exhausted side, so I've got my coffee today. I'm going to be drinking lots of coffee, I'm sure, and I've been drinking lots of coffee. For all my coffee lovers out there, I've gotten very non-discriminate at this point. I'm just like, give me the caffeine. But things have been really exciting and busy with a lot of exciting things here at Foundation Restoration. Especially, I've been working on, we're expanding into the suite that is adjacent to our current suite where we see clients, and so it's been really exciting to get that all upfitted. And the past couple weeks, I've been working super hard trying to get we're adding 3 rooms for therapy, for counseling. We have 2 new clinicians that are one's beginning this week, and we have another one that will be joining us later this month. And so it's just been really exciting to pull that all together and see that come together and see the growth and the goodness of the Lord in our ministry. And there's a big training room back there, which we've been doing some events in there already, and just going to continue to bolster the events that we're doing, and just super duper grateful. But it has been crazy getting that all prepared, getting all of those new therapy rooms set up and ready to go. So thank you to our faithful supporters, our donors who have kept our ministry afloat, who have allowed us the opportunity to grow, to serve more people in our community. We are just incredibly thankful for each of you and your support. So thank you for donating. And if anybody feels led, if you're blessed by this podcast, if you believe in our ministry, if you're excited about the growth, which I wish I could give you all a tour. I know that you guys are listening from all over the place, but man, I wish I could have you show up, have a cup of coffee, and show you all that God's doing here, show you our facilities, and just sharing the excitement with you. But if you feel compelled to support our ministry, gosh, we are so grateful, and we are blessed and strengthened in our mission by your financial support, by your prayers, by your encouragement. But certainly if you feel led to give a tax-deductible gift and to support us, whether it's one time or monthly, whether it's $2, whether it's $2,000, whatever it is, it all makes a huge difference. We're grateful for it all. You can go to foundationrestoration.org/donate to give, or just visit the website and you'll see there's a link on there. But we are so grateful for our donors, and it's been a really exciting time to see the new space and seeing it come together, and the new therapy rooms. And we'll be posting on our social media pictures and stuff so that you guys can see. And our supporters are on a newsletter. We send out an e-newsletter every once in a while with some updates. So if you're a supporter, you can be looking forward to getting that if you've given us your email address to be able to do that and send you updates. But we're just super grateful, and thank you to those of you who faithfully support our ministry. It means everything. Couldn't do it without you. So it's been really exciting to watch all of this come together and to see God blessing it and growing it. And we just pray that He would continue to allow us to serve others through it. Just celebrated 15 years with my husband. It's kind of crazy. We're going to be going to Asheville to celebrate. By the time you guys hear this, that trip will have already happened. It's so funny. We've lived in Raleigh for over 10 years and we've never been to Asheville. So looking forward to checking out that area and seeing some of the iconic spots, go to the Biltmore, all of those things. So definitely looking forward to that. It's just crazy. You think 15 years just flew by. It is hard to believe. I look at myself and say, am I really that old? And I know those of you who have celebrated much longer anniversaries are probably rolling your eyes, but you know how it is when you're in the moment. You just think, how do I have an almost 6-year-old and how have I been married for 15 years? Like, I don't know how that happened, but again, just grateful for the Lord's goodness in life and in the ministry, but things have been very busy. All that to say, things have been very, very busy. So thank you for that little moment of getting my own therapy in. So grateful that you guys have joined us. And today I'm really excited about this topic. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, which in case you haven't noticed, that's usually what these podcasts are about. Things that have been in my heart or mind or have been just turning up in personal or professional settings. But the reality is having a positive attitude and outlook on things is great, right? It's a great thing. Being optimistic, seeing the good. There's certainly worthy qualities and character traits. Like who doesn't love being around an upbeat, positive person that has a great outlook and a great attitude? We all do. We love being around that happy person who just seems like they love life and there's nothing that's going to bring them down from cloud 9. Optimism can be very contagious, and so it's just wonderful to be around. We kind of, hope that someone else's optimism will rub off on us, and we need optimistic people who see the good and the silver lining in life. But is there such a thing as being too optimistic? Can positivity ever be damaging? And is there ever a point in optimism where enough is enough? And so in this episode, we're going to discuss optimism and when it crosses a line into something that we would call toxic positivity. When we're going to explore the difference, how to strike the right balance between optimism and toxic positivity. So let's dive in. First of all, what is optimism? And I think kind of defining that and setting those parameters is important. And I would say optimism is a tendency to expect. Actually, this is the actual definition if you look it up. So it's not what I think, it's the actual definition. Optimism is a tendency to expect the best possible outcome or to dwell on the most hopeful aspects of a situation. Sounds wonderful, right? Very idyllic. Optimism, this is kind of going into now my thoughts on this. My perspective is that optimism is seeing the good. It's focusing on the good. It's having an overall hopeful outlook on things. It's kind of like that song, always look on the bright side of life. But what's funny about that song is it talks about like all the crappy stuff that's going on, right? But like to look on the bright side of life, always to look on the light side of life. You're welcome for those little ditties. Whenever I just randomly bust out into song, I really do try not to do that too often to you guys. You're not here to hear me sing. You're here to hear me talk. But you've heard the famous saying, right? When life gives you lemons, you make what? Lemonade, right? These are very optimistic kind of outlooks and approaches and things to say. Optimism is kind of this usually cheerful persona. It pushes through discomfort or the circumstances to focus on that upside. Again, these are the silver lining people. This is a silver lining perspective. And it sounds lovely, right? Like we love that. We love that silver lining. We love the optimism. We love the hopeful, the cheerful, the lemonade people. But there comes a point where optimism can be damaging. And that is when it becomes toxic positivity. So what is toxic positivity? Toxic positivity is when you refuse to look at the reality of a situation. So the optimism that you're expressing is rooted in a fantasy instead of facts. It's when we don't face the truth, we don't face reality. Toxic positivity is this untethered positivity that avoids the responsibility of a situation. It blindly believes that all is good when all is not. Optimism says, I see the truth. I see the realities of this tough situation, but I'm choosing to focus on the light at the end of the tunnel, which right now I'm encompassed in darkness, right? I am in a tunnel, but I'm choosing to focus on this light at the end of the tunnel. And so it's looking at where you actually are. Optimism is looking at where you are and the reality of it and focusing on the light at the end of the tunnel, whereas toxic positivity just says, no, I'm not in a tunnel. No, there's no darkness. Everything's great. Optimism says, hey, the future is bright, but I'm going to be realistic about the darkness. Whereas toxic positivity completely dismisses, it denies, and ignores reality where there's struggle or darkness. It just, again, I refuse to look at the struggle. I refuse to acknowledge the struggle or the darkness. I'm just focused on the ideal. And optimism builds on what is, whereas toxic positivity just focuses on what could be. Like, no, this is going to be super successful. It doesn't matter that we're almost bankrupt, or it doesn't matter that this is completely falling apart. Like, no, it's going to be great. Everything's going to be great. Whereas optimism says, man, things are really not looking good. We're currently in a situation that is dire. Things are falling apart. But you know what? I believe that despite that, there is hope to be able to get things on track. And so we just got to figure out how to get there. Optimism is hope rooted in reality, whereas toxic positivity denies reality in hopes of some sort of fantasy outcome. Without any action items, by the way. Like there's no action, there's no actual steps to get to that fantasy outcome. It's just it's gonna happen, right? Like good things happen to good people. If I do the right things, like everything's just going to magically work out because that's how this works. And I mentioned this a little bit in the unfairness of life. It's kind of a little bit in that prosperity gospel, which again could be controversial, but it's in that prosperity gospel concept of just like, if you say it, it'll happen. If you pray it, say it, claim it, it'll happen. But again, that's not reality. That is that toxic positivity versus the optimism that says, I know what is, but I'm hopeful for what could be. The challenge of toxic positivity is that denial of reality. Real feelings, real problems, real challenges, real issues, real people, right? That is reality. That we have real feelings, that we have real problems in life. We face real challenges. There are real issues, that people are real. And the people who are facing things are real, right? Because this toxic positivity can be toxic to ourselves, but it can be toxic to others. Like, oh, it's fine. It's going to be okay. Your situation's fine. It's not that bad. Like, no, everything's good. No, you don't need to. Just focus on the good. Focus on the good. Focus on the good. And when we deny reality, we're purely living in fantasy. And then all of our efforts become futile. Again, optimism is rooted in reality. It accepts the darkness. It accepts the emotions. It accepts the challenges and obstacles, but it chooses to cling to the hope in the midst of those realities. It peers into the light at the end of the tunnel, pressing forward, knowing the reality of the situation. The necessary ingredient that toxic positivity lacks is being based in reality. If we can't face reality, no matter how bleak, we are operating with smoke and mirrors. It's when we're willing to face the truth, the hard truths of our own lives or those around us, have the courage to cling to the hope of what can be, even if it's a speck of light at the end of the tunnel, that we find the power of optimism. Because the reality is, and we talked about this in episode 19, life is cruel. It can be sour, like lemons, right? It can be hard. It can be full of heartache. The Bible tells us in this world you'll have troubles. Take heart. I've overcome the world. Again, and I love that scripture because Jesus is even saying, right? Like, here's the reality. In this world, you will have troubles. He's not saying you're not going to have trouble. No, everything's going to be great. He says, in this world, you will have troubles. But, and here's the hope, here's the optimism. Take heart. Why? Because I've overcome the world. So again, Jesus is saying, here's the reality. Let's embrace it. Let's acknowledge it. It's going to be hard. You're going to struggle. But hang in there. Have hope. Take heart because I've overcome the world, right? So that's optimism, right? It's rooted in reality. And so we just have to realize that life is full of unpleasant things and unpleasant situations. And that's a fact for you. It's a fact for me. We can't just stick our heads in the sand. We can't just put our fingers in our ears and la, 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 like I'm not listening. We don't just pull the covers over our face and pretend that it's not true, that there aren't hardships, that there aren't uncomfortable feelings. You know, we can't pretend that life is all sunshine and rainbows, because if we do, we deny the growth of the challenges Like the challenges and the darkness and the realities, the cruel realities of life are what grow us and strengthen us and soften us and tenderize us. And again, I've talked about that in several other episodes of the podcast. Because again, my whole life is built on helping people through the hard stuff of life, because life is hard. And when we acknowledge that with the hope of a better future, then what we do is we get strengthened, we grow, we get tenderized. We are more empathetic, we are more caring, we're more gracious. And the reality is, if we just have this toxic positivity, we even miss out on those tender moments of getting to journey with someone else through their brokenness, right? What an honor and a privilege to say, you know what, the reality of your situation is really tough. But you know what? You aren't alone. I'm here for you. I care for you. Let's walk through it and figure out how we can cling to that light at the end of the tunnel. Let me help you see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I'm not going to deny your reality and the difficulties of it. So let's walk hand in hand through this. There's much to be gleaned from the not so fun parts of life and facing the reality head on with the hope and optimism for what could be. To pretend that things are something they aren't without being based in reality of what is, and without contemplating actual steps or action items to get where we want or need to go, is toxic and it's futile. It's in the embracing the hard with the hope of the future that we find our traction to get there. I think about Jesus and Lazarus. Struggling with that one this morning. Oh man, get that coffee, y'all. I gotta get that coffee. But you know, what's crazy, that story in John 11, which I'd encourage you to read it, and read it from this perspective of optimism. Jesus had the hope of knowing that he was going to heal Lazarus. He knew it all. He literally is Jesus. He's the Son of God. He knew what the outcome was going to be. It wasn't even just the hope of the outcome. It was literally, he held the outcome in his hands. He was sovereign. He has control. He knew that he was going to raise him from the dead. But what's interesting to me is that he still embraced the reality, the grief of that moment. He embraced the reality of the temporary loss for himself and those around him. Right? It said Jesus wept. He knew that he was going to raise him from the dead. He knew his friend would not stay dead, and yet he wept. Does that seem like he's denying the reality of a situation just to say, no, everything's going to be fine? And I think what's really interesting is where that scripture of Jesus wept came. He was telling Martha and Mary, the sisters of Lazarus, that their brother was going to rise again. He was literally telling them, here's your hope. Here's the reality. Like, he's not dead. He's going to rise again. And still, scriptures later, it says he wept at the loss. He wept at their loss. He wept at his loss. He wept at the reality of what was, while even knowing what would be. And that is optimism. That's the difference between optimism and toxic positivity. Optimism embraces the what is and hopes for the what will be. And we have to trust in the sovereignty and goodness of God. Therein lies our help and our hope for the future. But we still have to do our part, right? We don't just say, all right, God's in control, so I can just live out of control and it doesn't matter. No, nothing's out of control. No, we say things feel very out of control. Lord, I am not in a great place. Lord, this seems hopeless. Lord, I don't understand. We are allowed to embrace the emotions and the difficulties of a moment and still then rest in the sovereignty and goodness of God, the promises of God that He will use these things for our good and for His glory. Optimism says, I see what is, I hope for what could be. And then as a believer, and I rest in the sovereignty and the hands of who holds it all, including me. As we wrap up, I think about Philippians 4:8, and it says, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And I love that scripture because, yes, we want to keep our eyes fixed on the horizon of the hope that we have in Jesus, the hope of heaven, the hope of our sorrows all coming to an end at some point. We have the hope and the promises of Jesus to cling to. We have the hope of his love for us. And in this life, we are going to struggle. We're going to hurt. We're going to have heartache. There's going to be very difficult situations where the miry clay that we're stuck in, there's going to be the pain and the heartache and the loss and the grief and the tough emotions for us, for those around us. And we do have to focus on our thoughts, take our thoughts captive and focus on things that are true, noble, right, pure, lovely, and admirable, and also that are excellent and praiseworthy. But that being said, we cannot deny reality. We cannot just ignore that there are things that we have to do, that we have a responsibility. We can't bury our treasure, like the parable, right? The parable with the treasures, the talents that were given to 3 different servants, right? We don't want to be the servant who took the talent, the treasure that was given to us, and bury it and say, well, hey, at least I didn't lose it, right? We're not burying our head. We're not burying our talents. We're not burying the pain. We're not burying the opportunity. No, instead, what we're doing is we are taking our talents and we're doing something with it. And we're saying the reality is this takes work, this takes effort, but I know that the reward will be great. The harvest will be great. I want to leave you with Psalm 121. I love this Psalm and I just felt like it was fitting. Maybe it's not to you, but it just spoke to me. And so I wanted to conclude today's podcast with Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Friends, the reality is life is difficult. Our feet will want to slip. We will have harm come at us. We will have weapons formed against us. We will be in spiritual battles. We will face difficulties. We will face struggles. But our optimism is in that while we toil, while we work, while we steward what God gives us, while we make the most of those opportunities for us and for those around us, the Lord is watching over us. He is with us. He is using those situations to grow us and to perfect our faith, to grow us for our good, for his glory. So let's have a positive outlook, right? Let's hope for the best. Let's press on with confident hope and boldness and courage in Christ while still acknowledging the reality, right? Let's stay tethered in reality while we press on with hope and with gladness. The joy of the Lord is our strength. Well, friends, this concludes this episode of the Real Talk Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We are so glad you did. Remember, you were handcrafted by God, are dearly loved, and greatly needed in this world. We look forward to seeing you back here next time. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Real Talk. To stay connected, follow Foundation Restoration on Instagram and Facebook at FND Restoration, or visit us at www.foundationrestoration.org for more information. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to follow or subscribe and to leave us a 5-star review so more people can find our show. Foundation Restoration is a 501c3 nonprofit ministry that believes marriage is the heartbeat of society and exists to equip, strengthen, and restore marriages through clinical expertise and a biblical perspective. Please consider supporting our ministry with a tax-deductible donation at www.foundationrestoration.org. Your gift makes programs like this possible. Thank you for your generosity and partnership.